Let's start with a picture, a sound, a grand, glittering palace, silks and golden spires, a powerful, often petulant king, and the brave, sensible Englishwoman who arrives to teach his children. You can almost hear the music, getting to know you. Shall we dance? For countless people in the West, this is Siam. This is the image of 19th century Thailand frozen in time by the magic of Rodgers and Hammerstein. It is romantic, it is dramatic, and for many Thais, it is almost unrecognizable. Welcome to Siam and Stripes. I am your guide, a bridge between two worlds, the world of the Siam of Thailand and the stripes of America. Today, we are not just comparing two contemporary cultures. We are comparing a culture with its own powerful global myth. We are asking the question, what did the king and I get so profoundly wrong about Siam? And, just as importantly, why? This isn't just a movie review. It's a journey into the heart of perception, how one culture sees another, and the stories we choose to tell about ourselves and about others. We will look at the real history of Siam that was ignored, and then we will look at the American cultural lens that created the story the world knows. This is a story of fact versus fantasy, and the vast ocean of misunderstanding that lies between. To find the truth, we have to gently set aside the Hollywood image and look at the reality of the 1860s. The man Hollywood portrays as a charming, semi-barbaric despot, King Mongkut or Rama IV, was in fact one of the most brilliant scholars of his age. Before he ever sat on the throne, he spent 27 years, nearly 3 decades, as a Buddhist monk. This was not a passive, isolated life. This was a life of intense study and reform. He mastered Pali, the sacred language of Buddhism. He traveled his future kingdom on foot, seeing the lives of ordinary people. He became so concerned with the state of the faith that he founded the Thammayut Nikaya, a new, reformist order of Buddhism, one that demanded a return to the original scriptures and a strict, disciplined monastic code. And his intellect, it did not stop at religion. He was a scientist, a man who learned Latin and English, who studied Western astronomy and mathematics. He became so proficient that he used his own calculations to predict a total solar eclipse, the one at Wakor in 1868. With such stunning precision, he defied the calculations of many Western experts at the time. He was, in short, a Renaissance man. This was not a king ruling by simple, childish decree. This was a leader desperately, thoughtfully navigating the single greatest threat his nation had ever faced, Western colonization. The Siam of the 1860s was not a fantasy kingdom. It was one of the only nations in Southeast Asia to avoid being colonized. Its neighbors, Burma, Laos, Vietnam, Cambodia, Malaya, all fell to British or French rule. The why behind his actions, including the hiring of Anna Leonowens, was not a whim. It was a calculated strategy, a specific move to modernize, to give his children a Western education so they could speak the language of the colonizers, and ultimately preserve the sovereignty of their nation. This is the foundation not of a storybook king, but of a survivalist, a scholar, and the father of modern Thailand. So, what is the legacy of this real history versus the legacy of the musical? In modern Thailand, the reverence for the monarchy, especially for King Chulalongkorn, Anna's student, is immense. King Chulalongkorn, or Rama V, is known as the Great Beloved King. He is the man who successfully enacted the reforms his father began, abolishing prostration, reforming the government from the top down, modernizing the law, and successfully steering the nation through the most treacherous geopolitical waters to freedom. The contemporary Thai identity is built not on a fantasy, but on a deep historical pride in this exact period. Thais are proud, profoundly so, of being the only nation in the region that was never a colony. And this is where the challenge arises. The King and I, in all its forms, is banned in Thailand. It's not banned simply because it's historically inaccurate. It is banned because it is seen as lèse-majesté, an act of deep disrespect against the crown. The portrayal of a revered monarch, a central, intellectual figure in their national story, as a buffoon, as a man who needs a foreign woman to teach him how to be civilized, is deeply, profoundly offensive. Imagine if a foreign country made a wildly popular comedic musical depicting Abraham Lincoln as a bumbling fool who was taught the principles of democracy by a Thai governess. The American reaction might be quite similar. Today, this creates a strange dichotomy. The West often sees Thailand through this soft romantic musical lens. Tourists might arrive, half expecting this bygone exotic Siam. What they find is a complex, rapidly modernizing nation, a place that grapples with its own identity, but an identity it built itself. The unwritten rule, the unspoken pressure is this: Thais must constantly navigate the projections of the West, the expectation of being exotic, while simultaneously holding on to the truth of their own story, a story of sovereignty, intelligence, and survival. Let's paint a few pictures, not from the musical, but from the reality of Siam. These are the moment, the contexts, the musical completely misses. Vignette 1. The Inner Palace. The musical shows a harem of giggling, submissive wives, seemingly with no purpose but to please the king. The reality of the Phainai, the inner palace, was vastly different. This was not just a residence, it was an autonomous, self-governing city, populated and run entirely by women. These were not just concubines, they were noble women, officials, guards, treasurers, and artisans. They had their own hierarchy, their own economy, their own laws. The consorts of the king, like Queen Debsurindra, the mother of the future king Chulalongkorn, were powerful figures from powerful noble families. Their positions part of a complex web of national alliances, not just a romantic collection. Anna Leonongans, arriving in this world, was not the only strong, intelligent woman. She was one among thousands. Vignette 2. The Bow and the Blood. The musical presents prostration, the act of bowing to the floor before the king, as a central symbol of barbarism, something the Western Anna rightly refuses to do. This completely misunderstands the why. This was not just about abject submission. It was a codified visual language of social respect, of Puyai and Punoi, the elder and the younger, the one with more responsibility and the one who shows deference. It was the visual glue of a hierarchical society. In a deeply ironic twist, it was Anna's own student, King Chulalongkorn, who later abolished this very practice, not because a Westerner told him to, but as part of his own deliberate, gradual, and brilliant plan of modernization to change the visual language of his court on his own terms. Vignette 3. The Map of Survival. Imagine the king's study. It is not filled with costumes. It is filled with maps, letters from European heads of state, and astronomical charts. The conversations are not about, is a woman a head or a heart? The conversations are about, the French have just taken Cambodia. How do we protect our eastern border? The British demand new trade terms. How do we concede without giving away our sovereignty? This was a court, a government, playing a high-stakes game of chess, while the musical portrays them as playing checkers. This story of intellect and sovereignty, this real Siam, is a powerful one. So how did it become the story we all know? How did this complex history get flattened, simplified, and set to music? To understand that, we have to cross the ocean. We have to leave the Chao Phraya River of the 1860s and land in the America of the 1950s. We have to transition to the stripes. The Broadway musical The King and I debuted in 1951. The film followed in 1956. This is not a random date. This is post-World War II America, a nation standing as a new, undisputed global superpower, its primary rival, the Soviet Union. The world was being carved into new spheres of influence, and America was defining its identity not just as a power, but as a moral power, a beacon of freedom, of democracy, of individualism. This is the ideological foundation, the fertile ground in which the story of Anna and the King took root, the story America wanted to hear, and the story it wanted to tell the world was one that affirmed its own values. It was a story not about a complex Asian nation intelligently saving itself, but about a brave individual, a Westerner, bringing enlightenment and civilization to a despotic East. This is the lens, the specific American-centric filter through which the sensationalized memoirs of a 19th-century governess were transformed into one of the most powerful and most misleading cultural exports of the 20th century. We aren't just talking about a musical anymore. We are talking about the idea of Orientalism, the exotic East as a backdrop for Western adventure, and the deeply embedded narrative of the white savior. This American perspective, it required the king to be a barbarian so that Anna could be the hero. This American lens, this culture, it wasn't just about optimism. It was about narrative. The American way of life, especially in the mid-century, was deeply intertwined with the story of itself. It was a nation built on clear principles: individualism, the right to pursue happiness, the moral clarity of democracy versus tyranny. And it had a deep, almost religious belief in the power of education and progress, its version of progress, to solve the world's problems. When this culture looked at the messy, sensationalized, and frankly quite thin memoirs of Anna Leonowens, it didn't see the complex diplomatic chess game of King Mongkut. It saw a perfect, ready-made parable. It saw a story not about a foreign nation's sovereignty, but about its own most cherished values. The problem-solving here was cultural. The problem, a strange, uncivilized kingdom. The solution, a single, brave, individualistic Westerner, armed with books, maps, and common sense, who could teach a king, and by extension an entire nation, how to be more like, well, more like them. This is the Stripes mindset in its purest form. A genuine, often well-intentioned, but profoundly ethnocentric belief in its own narrative. The story of The King and I is perhaps one of the most successful and most damaging exports of this very worldview. Let's imagine 3 moments, 3 American vignettes that show this worldview in action. First, opening night, Broadway, 1951. The lights go down. The audience, many of them veterans of a world-defining war, see a king, a tyrant, really, who rules by whim. And they see Anna. She argues with him. She stands up to him. She changes him. When they finally, famously dance that polka, it isn't just a dance. To that audience, it is a symbol of East meeting West, and the East learning the steps. The applause is thunderous, not just for the music, but for the affirmation of their values. Second, a living room in Ohio, 1957. A family gathers around their new television set, perhaps watching the film broadcast. The children see exotic, beautiful costumes. They hear unforgettable songs. But what do they learn about Siam? They learn that its king is stubborn, that its wives are jealous, that its people need help. And they learn that one person, one brave woman, can make all the difference. They identify with Anna. She is their avatar. The real Siam, its politics, its religion, its survival, it never even enters the room. And third, a high school auditorium, perhaps just last year. Teenagers are painting sets, learning their lines. They sing "Getting to Know You" with genuine joy. The story is presented and accepted as a beloved classic, a harmless, romantic fantasy. The question of its historical accuracy, of its profound disrespect to another nation's founding father, is rarely, if ever, asked. Why? Because the American story, the story of the individual changing the world, is so powerful, so ingrained, it simply replaces the truth. This is where the 2 worlds, the Siam of reality and the stripes of fantasy, collide. And the collision, it creates very real and very modern pain points. Imagine a Thai student arriving in America for university. She is brilliant, a graduate of Chulalongkorn University, the very institution named for Anna's student. In her first week, a friendly classmate asks where she's from. "Thailand," she says. The American smiles. "Oh, wow! Like The King and I?" What is she supposed to do? In that moment, her entire proud history, the history of Rama IV, the scholar, and Rama V, the great modernizer, is reduced to a caricature, a song and dance man in pajamas. She feels a deep internal offense, but she is also guided by Krangjai. She doesn't want to make the American feel bad or ignorant. So she gives a small, tight smile and says, "It's not really like that." The misunderstanding, it just hangs in the air, unresolved. Or picture the American tourist. He arrives in Bangkok full of wonder, and he visits the Grand Palace. He is staggered by the beauty, the intricate gold leaf, the emerald Buddha. But he's looking for something. He's looking for the set. He's looking for the little house Anna lived in. He's searching for the world he saw in the film, and he cannot find it. He finds instead a complex, modern, bustling nation of 70 million people, a nation that was never a colony, a nation that built itself. He is confronted with a truth that is so much larger and more complex than the simple, comforting story he was told. The real Thailand is a shock. The ultimate clash is the work itself, a Western narrative that requires a barbarian king to civilize, colliding with the truth of a nation that revered that same king as the very scholar who saved them. So, is there a harmony? Is there a middle path? Or are these two stories doomed to be at war forever? Let's be objective. Let's walk that bridge. The American narrative, the musical, is not without its own merits if viewed as a fable. The music is sublime. It is a masterpiece of the American art form, and buried beneath the stereotypes, its intention is to champion the power of empathy, of education, and of cross-cultural understanding. It tried, in its own 1950s way, to say that different worlds can and should meet. But the cost was enormous. The con is that it practiced a kind of cultural identity theft, stealing the names and the setting of a real place to tell a story that was fundamentally untrue and deeply disrespectful. It cemented the Orientalist trope, the exotic East as a primitive emotional backdrop for a rational Western adventure. And what of the Thai perspective? The pro is the truth, a story of intellect, resilience, and quiet, brilliant diplomacy. A story of a nation that navigated the razor's edge of colonialism and won. It's a story, frankly, far more dramatic and compelling than the musical. But the con is the silence. By banning the film and largely refusing to engage with it on a global stage, Thailand protected its internal dignity, but it allowed the false narrative to become the only narrative the rest of the world knew. It left the slander unanswered. The middle path is, perhaps, here. It is for the West to learn to separate the art from the history, to love the music, but to actively, deliberately debunk the story. To teach our children, this is a beautiful play with beautiful songs, but let me tell you the true story of the real King Mongkut. And perhaps it is for Thailand to find a new voice, to tell its own story with the same passion and the same global reach that Hollywood used to tell its fantasy. The truth is that the musical is not a documentary about Siam. It is a perfect primary source document about the dreams and the blind spots of 1950s America. In the end, we are left with two kings. One is a creature of the stage, a man in silk, singing about his puzzles, needing a foreign governess to show him the world. He is a fantasy. The other is a man of history, a scholar in saffron robes, a scientist who studied the stars, a monarch who spoke multiple languages, a father who played a desperate game of geopolitical chess and won, securing his nation's freedom for all generations to come. He is the truth. The glitter of Hollywood, the power of a perfect melody, is intoxicating. It can create a myth so powerful it echoes for generations and completely obscures the real people and the real history it claims to portray. The King and I is a beautiful lie. The real Siam, The real King Mongkut is a story of quiet, intellectual, and profound triumph. Thank you for walking this bridge with me, between the story we know and the truth we must seek. My question for you to leave in the comments is this: what other stories, what other movies or books have you grown up loving, only to discover they obscure a much more complicated and important truth? I am your guide. This is Siam and Stripes. Please subscribe for more journeys between two worlds. We will see you next time.